keeping you informed.
Thank you.
Jason Page.
Demented and sad, but social.
Covering all the day's news from a studio somewhere in Southeast Asia.
Worldwide!
And talking about it with you.
Blah, blah, blah.
You're Up Late with Jason Page.
Hoo-ah!
Or up early.
Good morning.
But just stay up.
It is time.
Here's Jason.
Thank you, Chad Erickson, and thank you, world, for being with us inside the studios of Intersecting Media, Southeast Asia, Singapore to be exact. I am Jason Page. Welcome to Up Late for a Thursday/Friday edition of the show. You may notice the chat box isn't up. You can still make comments on the show today. What we're doing is, even though it says live in the corner, I mean, technically it's live while I'm recording the show. Typically, I do the show live every night from 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern, for those of you in the United States, and at noon in Singapore on Friday. But today, I'm going out and doing some shooting, some filming for a segment that we're going to be putting together for the show. And I don't want to spoil it. Okay, should I say it? Should I say where I'm going? I'm going to the zoo. So we're going to be doing some fun shooting over at the Singapore Zoo on Friday morning, Friday afternoon. And so I'm recording the show live, as if it's live, and then we're literally doing the show a couple hours earlier than we would typically do the show. And then you'll be able to watch it in its normal time. So anyway, and it's kind of appropriate that I'm going to a zoo on Friday, because is there any other way to describe the American political environment right now than to call it a zoo? I mean, it's what it is. It's a zoo. It's an absolute zoo. Equipped with all the type of behaviors you would expect if you went to a zoo. So it's kind of apropos that I should be going to a zoo later today to go do some filming. It's kind of crazy. I was watching I got up early today because we were obviously shooting the show a little earlier, but I got up early to go and prep for the program. We got a lot of video for you today on the program. I'll give you that heads up in advance. We also have a clip from my exclusive interview with Beatrice Finn. She is the executive director of ICAN, which was basically established to abolish nuclear weapons. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons is ICAN. Its executive director is Beatrice Finn. She is part of a team that won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017, and I am honored to speak with her because nuclear weapons is something that has always been in the back of my mind. It used to be at the front of my mind when I was a kid. In the back of my mind, and the back of a lot of people's minds as an adult. But I've got a story as to how I became, I guess, enamored. Maybe that's the wrong word. Fascinated by nuclear weapons. And I had this long, wide-ranging conversation with Beatrice Finn. We taped it last night. It is 45 minutes long, so we're not going to air the whole thing here. If you want to listen to the entire conversation, subscribe to the Intersection podcast. We're going to put it out in 2 parts next Monday and Tuesday. My conversation with 2017 Nobel Peace Prize winner Beatrice Finn from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. It's a fascinating conversation and look inside the world of nuclear weapons and a world with nuclear weapons. 9 countries have nuclear weapons. Did you realize that? Could you name the 9 countries? if you're watching the show and you can name the 9 countries, go ahead. See if you can do it without Googling it. I actually posed this question to my partner last night. I said, can you name the 9? And he was able to name some of them. But not easy to do. It's not as easy as you think. I mean, there's the obvious ones of, United States, China, Russia. But can you name the others? North Korea. We talk about North Korea, and again, we'll have a portion of my conversation coming up in a few minutes with Beatrice Finn. We'll give you a little sampling of the conversation we had regarding nuclear weapons. That's coming up here in this episode of Up Late. All right, so we talked yesterday on the show about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's a full court press to basically get her taken off the education and labor committees in Congress. The House Republicans didn't want to take her off. They decided last night not to even take a vote on taking her off those committees. So Democrats said, if you don't want to do it, we'll do it for you. But before there was a vote, there were speeches. Oh, were there speeches? One of them offered up by Marjorie Taylor Greene herself. Take a listen.
Madam Speaker, my Democrat colleagues.
All right, I'll have to pull that up for you guys here in just a second. Just give me a moment. We'll get the audio from that here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Now we can give you Marjorie Taylor Greene in her own words. Here we go.
To the American people, to my mom and dad, and my husband and my children. I've been here for 1 month and a day, and I've gotten to know part of my conference, my Republican colleagues, but not even all of them yet. I haven't gotten to know any of my Democrat colleagues. And
boy, I wonder why she didn't get to know any of her Democratic colleagues. Could it be because, I don't know, just before the election, when she was running for Congress, she had a poster of her holding a machine gun, basically, with a picture of the squad, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, talking about how she had to challenge them, how she had to take them on. Yeah, picture with a gun. I wonder why they wouldn't want to meet you.
And I haven't had to have any conversations with any of you to tell you who I am and what I'm about. You only know me by how Media Matters, CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of them.
Now she's going to blame the media. This is the next tactic that's taken in all this, is to blame the media.
Mainstream media is portraying me. What you don't know about me is that I'm a very proud wife of almost 25 years, that I'm a mother of 3 children, and I consider being a mother the greatest blessing of my life and the greatest thing that I'll ever achieve. I'm proudly the first person to graduate college in my family, making my parents very happy and proud. I'm also a very successful business owner. We've grown our company from 1 state to 11 states. I'm a very hard worker. I've always paid my taxes. I've never been arrested.
Can you imagine? Well, wow, the bar is, I've never been arrested. It's a low bar. Can you imagine this woman procreated? No, really. I've always said people take a test to take a driving exam. People have to take a driver's examination. You got to get in the car with, some guy with a clipboard and who's probably just doodling on the pad. And you got to take a test in order to get a driver's license, to operate a motor vehicle. No such test exists for having to bring a child into the world. Maybe it should.
I've never done drugs, but I've gotten a few speeding tickets in my day. What you need to know about me is I'm a very regular American.
Yeah.
Just like the people I represent in my district and most people across the country. I never, ever considered to run for Congress or even get involved in politics. As a matter of fact, I wasn't a political person until I found a candidate that I really liked, and his name is Donald J. Trump when he ran for president.
Oh, my God. Yeah, she said, hey, if this batshit crazy old man could get into the White House, why can't I get into Congress?
To me, he was someone I could relate to, someone that I enjoyed his plain talk, not the offensive things, but just the way he talked normally. And I thought, finally, maybe
No. The way he talks normally is offensive.
this is someone that will do something about the things that deeply bother me, like the fact that we're so deeply in debt that our country has murdered over 62 million people in the womb. The fact that our borders are open and some of my friends have had their children murdered by illegal aliens.
They're called undocumented immigrants. Continue.
Perhaps that maybe we can stop sending our sons and daughters to fight in foreign wars and be used as the world's police, basically. Or maybe that our government would stand up for our American businesses and our American jobs and make the American people and the American taxpayers their focus. These are the things that I care about deeply. So when we elected President Trump, and then I started seeing things in the news that didn't make sense to me, like Russian collusion, which are conspiracy theories also, and have been proven so. These things bothered me deeply, and I realized just watching CNN or Fox News, I may not find the truth. And so what I did is I started looking up things on the internet, asking questions like most people do every day. Use Google. And
Because the internet never lies. I think I have a t-shirt that says something like that. And Google, I mean, if it's on Google, it has to be true.
And I stumbled across something, and this was at the end of 2017, called QAnon. Well, these posts were mainly about this Russian collusion information. A lot of it was some of what I would see on the news at night, and I got very interested in it. So I posted about it on Facebook. I read about it. I talked about it. I asked questions about it, and then more information came from it. But you see, here's the problem. Throughout 2018, because I was upset about things and didn't trust the government really, because the people here weren't doing the things that I thought they should be doing for us, the things that I just told you I cared about. And I want you to know, a lot of Americans don't trust our government, and that's sad.
Yes, a lot of people don't trust the government. And you know why? People like Donald Trump and Josh Hawley and Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz that have fomented this sentiment, that have said you shouldn't trust your government. You're exactly right. People don't trust the government. And that is part of what's at the heart of what is plaguing America right now. People don't trust the government. I say this all the time. I'm in a country where largely the government and its people have a mutual trust for each other. A fundamental understanding that we will make sure you're taken care of if you abide by these guidelines. Again, the coronavirus handling, the handling of the coronavirus pandemic here is exhibit A of that. The government says wear masks, everybody wears masks. Yes, there's a huge fine if you get caught not wearing one. There are consequences if businesses break the law. But guess what? There's no coronavirus here because people trust the government. People trust the science.
The problem with that is, though, is I was allowed to believe things that weren't true, and I would ask questions about them and talk about them. And that is absolutely what I regret. Because if it weren't for the Facebook post and comments that I liked in 2018, I wouldn't be standing here today, and you couldn't point a finger and accuse me of anything wrong.
Oh, no? Stalking David Hogg as he went to the Capitol to go meet with lawmakers? That atrocious video that I won't even replay on this show because of how disgusting and despicable it is. Attacking a shooting survivor, a mass shooting survivor. That's not reprehensible. Not going to apologize for that. You're going to apologize? I wrote a couple things on Twitter. I put a few things on Facebook.
Because I've lived a very good life that I'm proud of, my family's proud of, my husband's proud of, my children are proud of, and that's what my district elected me for. So later in 2018, when I started finding misinformation, lies, things that were not true in these.
You mean lies like Democrats are drinking babies' blood to stay young and stay alive? Flesh-eating aliens? Really? That's wow. That's not misinformation?
QAnon post, I stopped believing it. And I want to tell you, any source, and I say this to everyone, any source of information that is a mix of truth and a mix of lies is dangerous, no matter what it is saying, what party it is helping,
My God.
anything or any country it's about. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And these are the things that happen on the left and the right.
There's the both sides,
and it is a true problem in our country.
Yeah.
So I walked away from those things, and I decided I'm going to do what I've done all my life. I'm going to work hard and try to solve the problems that I'm upset about. So I started getting involved in politics. You see, school shootings are absolutely real.
Oh, thanks. School shootings are real. We needed you to go on the floor of Congress to say that? Really? The mere fact that you have to go on the floor of Congress to say that is proof of how batshit crazy the stuff you said in the past was.
And every child that is lost, those families mourn it. I understand how terrible it is because when I was 16 years old in 11th grade, my school was a gun-free school zone, and one of my schoolmates brought guns to school and took our entire school hostage. And that happened right down the hall from my classroom. I know the fear that David Hogg had that day. I know the fear that these kids have. And this is why, and I say this sincerely with all my heart, because I love our kids, every single one of your children, all of our children. I truly believe that children at school should never be left unprotected. I believe they should be just as protected as we were with 30,000 National Guardsmen. Our children are our future, and they're our most precious resource.
This is a woman at this point, and you can see it on your screen. This is a woman who's literally in save my ass mode. I got to save my ass. It's the realization that at this moment, this woman knows she's about to be completely neutered as it relates to her role in Congress. Because if she gets taken off the Labor Committee, she gets taken off the Education Committee, she's basically walking around the halls of Congress for the next 4 years doing nothing. Because she has no sway. She'll have no pull. Yeah, she might fundraise and make a lot of money for her campaign reelection. But this is a woman in cover your ass mode. And as for the statement she made that, well, I didn't say anything on the campaign trail about QAnon. No, because you wouldn't answer any questions about it. Because you wanted those votes. You needed those votes. So you rode the wave without saying you were riding the wave because you wanted those votes. You wanted that support. And now you have helped to legitimize something that is, again, absolutely nuts. And that's the QAnon movement.
I also want to tell you 9/11 absolutely happened. I remember that
9/11
day
happened.
crying.
Well, wow. Can we get a breaking news band? 9/11 happened. Thank you.
All day long watching it on the news. And it's a tragedy for anyone to say it didn't happen. And so that I definitely want to tell you.
You mean it's a tragedy for anybody to say it didn't happen? Like when you said, well, plane crashed into the Pentagon? I didn't see a plane.
Do not believe that it's fake.
Oh, okay.
I also want to tell you that we've got to do better. You see, big media companies can take teeny tiny pieces of words that I've said, that you have said, any of us, and can portray us into someone that we're not.
Yeah.
And that is wrong. Cancel culture is a real thing.
It's a real thing, and it's a great thing by and large. Are there examples of it that are where it's run amok? Are there examples of it where perhaps it's overused? Sure. But here's the thing. Social media today, okay? Social media today, while not perfect, and we're seeing some of that now in terms of how it's being managed, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, YouTubes of the world. While it is not a perfect system that is in place, these things are checks and balances. Along with the fact that we live in, the cell phone era where anybody can document something that is happening, whether it's police shootings, whether it's something like Morgan Wallen, which we'll get to later in the show, which is a little far afield, whether it's politicians saying things that they shouldn't be saying, entertainers, athletes, whatever it may be, public officials. These are checks and balances. These are checks on power that are out there today. And context is important. That's one thing that she's saying that's true. But there's been so much context given to Marjorie Taylor Greene at this point, and she has said and done so many different things that go way over the line that she loses in the argument of, well, people are taking clips and little pieces of what I'm saying. No. Anybody who looks at everything you've said and done at this point could easily make the determination that you are not worthy of holding a seat on these two committees. You may have been voted in and you could serve in Congress, even though I would question even the sanity in that logic. But at the end of the day, you cannot put this woman in any position of major decision-making authority given her past rhetoric.
It's very real. And when big tech companies like Twitter, you can scroll through and see where someone may have retweeted porn. This is a problem.
Oh, yes, porn.
This is a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. You know where the most porn in America is watched? Do you know where? The Bible Belt. You know what Georgia is? The Bible Belt. Yeah. That's where your porn's being watched, folks. The people that say, I don't watch porn. I only have sex in the missionary position. Give me a break.
But yet, when I say that I absolutely believe with all my heart that God's creation is He created them male and female, and that should not be denied, when I am censored for saying those type of things, that is wrong. You see, here's the real situation. I decided to run for Congress because I wanted to help our country. I want Americans to have our American dream. I want to protect our freedoms.
All right.
This is what I ran for Congress on. I never once said during my entire campaign, QAnon.
No,
I never once said
you
any of the
didn't.
things that I am being accused of today during my campaign. I never said any of these things since I have been elected for Congress.
Great. It doesn't mean you're absolved of everything you did before you got to Congress. I can't even finish this complete statement. I can't do it. I'm sorry. We gotta pull the plug on Marjorie Taylor. I gave her 8 minutes, which is more than any news network probably gave her in prime time tonight. So that's as much as I can give to her. Slightly shorter clip here. Steny Hoyer, the number 2 man in the House after Nancy Pelosi. This was his response to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I think it kind of speaks volumes.
I heard about motherhood today. 2 of those women, between them, have 6 children. They're mothers. One of them does not have children. And she's come to this body asking for more housing for people, for more health care for people, for more income for people. How awful. And they're not the Squad. They're Ilan. They're Alexandria. And they're Rashida. They are people.
You see that image? You see
They are
it?
colleagues.
That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. That is a post of hers that she put on Facebook with her holding a semi-automatic rifle and 3 members, Democratic members of Congress. I mean, how do you not take that as anything other than a veiled threat? It's not even veiled. How do you defend this?
And yes, you may have disagreements. But I don't know anybody, including Steve King, who you precluded from going on committees. Or much less.
That's the best part. Listen to the woman in the background. Watch this. This is great. Listen to this again.
Including Steve King, who you precluded from going on committees. For much less. And this is an AR-15 in the hands of Miss Greene. This was on Facebook just a few months ago. That is a message of peace and reconciliation and peaceful democratic dialogue. The Squad's worst enemy, AR-15, in hand.
There it is again. Yeah, one more time.
Hand.
Sounds like the guns I fled.
I have never, ever seen that before.
Woman going, is just the best part of that video. But Steny Hoyer made as good a closing argument as you can. And then they voted. And this is where it's hard to fathom how you can even have a conversation about bringing Republicans and Democrats together when they vote to take her off the committee, labor and education committees. 199 members of the GOP in the House said Marjorie Taylor Greene should stay on the committees. I want you to understand something. Only 11 Republicans voted to strip her of her assignments on those committees. 11. If you're Democrats, how do you work with those 199 members of the GOP that just said to you, pardon my French here, but we don't give a shit. We don't care that this woman has basically made veiled threats. She said to hang Obama. You won't hear this on Fox News tonight. You won't hear this on Newsmax or OANN or Glenn Beck or Sean Hannity or Rush Limbaugh. You won't hear this because they lack the intellectual courage, the intellectual honesty to have this conversation with you. And I will say this. It is now incumbent upon the Democratic Party that if their members make similar types of remarks, although I haven't heard any that have made remarks to this extreme, I have criticized Democrats when they've made these kind of comments on any platform that I've had the opportunity to make that on. You can go look it up. If Democrats make these kind of comments now, and Nancy Pelosi has said it, they're gone. We'll pull them off committees ourselves. And understand that while the vote today to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene passed, it passed with just 11 Republicans voting in favor of it. All the Democrats voted in favor of it. And now the precedent has been set. We know that Republicans love to cite precedent when it works in their favor. And if Republicans should regain control of the House, you got to think at some point in time in this lifetime they will, which Democrats are going to start to be removed from committees for things that they have said in the past. So you might be applauding today that Marjorie Taylor Greene's been taken off of these committees. But remember, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years from now, whenever it happens, you're not going to have a leg to stand on if you're Democrats. All right, that's how we kick off the show today. I want to switch gears to a topic that is of great import to me, and that is nuclear proliferation. I grew up when I was 7 years old. True story. When I was 7 years old, there was a movie back in 1984. 43 years old. There was a movie called Threads that came out. And it aired on regular television. Watched it in our basement. I'll never forget watching this movie in our basement. And it was a 2-part movie series. And it was about the UK being attacked by a nuclear missile, nuclear bomb. And it was the attack and then the aftermath of, the nuclear fallout. And this movie had a very big impact on me at a very young age. It's not something a 7-year-old should have been watching, but somehow I managed to watch it. And it gave me nightmares. It made me terrified of the idea that, what if a nuclear bomb hit? I mean, my God. Then you had Chernobyl soon after that, and we saw what happened with the fallout from the Chernobyl meltdown. But for many years, we've simply heard rhetoric as it relates to nuclear weapons. And yes, in the case of North Korea, we've had testing. But ultimately, it feels like the issue of nuclear proliferation's gone on the back burner with the fact that we're in a pandemic, with the fact that we talk about chemical weapons and warfare of a different kind. Warfare's taken on different sorts of looks. The way that our military tends to go on the offensive is much different. Nuclear is a very outdated term. I wanted to have a conversation about this, and when I had the opportunity to speak with Beatrice Finn, it was something I had to jump at. She's executive director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. She won a Nobel Peace Prize with that group in 2017. I had a wide-ranging, lengthy conversation with her last night. It's about 45 minutes long. We are not going to air the entire thing here on Up Late because it's just simply too long to do so. It will air in its entirety in 2 parts on the Intersection podcast. We'll drop part 1 next Monday. We'll drop part 2 next Tuesday. And it's something I would encourage you to watch and listen to, as she is a real authority on this topic. And her organization, ICAN, in 2017, got nations from around the world to sign this ban on nuclear weapons, this treaty banning nuclear weapons around the world. Now, the problem is the 9 nuclear nations of the world did not sign on to this ban. That includes the United States, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Israel, France, the UK. They didn't sign on to it. India. And that's a problem. So I had a conversation with Beatrice Finn, who is the executive director of this organization. And I wanted to give you a little sampling of it. And as I said, we will make the entire interview available on the Intersection podcast. Enjoy. Being a recent expat of the United States, let me hit the obvious questions here. How much did Donald Trump as president age you over the last 4 years, given the rhetoric, the immaturity, the lack of understanding of many political issues around the world, and probably nuclear weapons falls into that category? I mean, how much sleep did you lose knowing you could wake up one morning and Donald Trump just happened to, you know what, let's fire off those nuclear codes. Why not? You know, I mean, the whole back and forth with Kim Jong-un before they started exchanging flowery love letters and all. I mean, I can't imagine how somebody in your position went to sleep at night knowing that situation was out there.
It's really funny that you say that, because actually there's been two moments, right, during his presidency where I was actually really scared. And I think the first one was with Kim Jong-un and North Korea, you know, when they had that extremely tense situation. And then that coupled with this false alarm in Hawaii.
Oh,
where
yes.
People in Hawaii, that was exactly at that moment, right? So had I been in Hawaii, then I would have taken it seriously. Like, no, but seriously, because it was so tense at that point. Yeah. And, you know, obviously things move so fast, we've already forgotten about it. But that was terrifying for people. People hid their kids in sewers, right? Googling, like, what to do in a nuclear attack. And the fact that we're sort of living through that. And, you know, it was so bizarre. And I was really, really worried there how quickly things can escalate. And the other thing was really his last week in office. You know, seeing kind of him slowly losing his mind, like the disconnect from reality, having Nancy Pelosi, right, calling the military to try to get assurance that they would stage a coup if he tried to do it. I mean, because that's basically what she asked them. Yeah. That the military would disobey the orders of a democratically elected president. That's the definition of a coup. So I think that, you know, that was also extremely nerve-wracking. But I think that one of the most difficult things during these 4 years has also been the distraction. It's been like the mental space and the energy that him and his comments, and you get very much sucked into it. And I think that also journalists probably have had this, like, what does it say today, right? And then you get like the whole day is spent on responding or like explaining, and we're outraged and we tweet very angrily that this is the worst thing he's ever done. And then the next day it's something else that they throw at you. And it makes you also forget that you have work to do, right? Like, so one of the things that I felt also kind of already in December when, you know, people moved on from the election, right? Like, you know, the election, yes, they were still contesting it, but most people agree that Biden is the president. It's going to be a new president. There was this like huge relief, not just because of him, but also like, I don't care what he says anymore. I don't have to respond to it. I don't have to think about it. Now, all of this energy we can spend on trying to make things better, right? Not spend the time being angry about what he just said and being out. Like, it's become this whole like thing that you've engaged in over the last 4 years. And I'm not going to lie, like, you know, some of it has been, you know, very beneficial for people against Trump, right? Like, it's been a marketing thing, right? Like, you say something, Trump is so bad, and you argue and you get lots of retweets and you get lots of attention, but it's like it's not a productive attention. It's not a productive result, and it doesn't lead us forward. So I'm quite excited now about having, you know, I don't agree with this president on the nuclear weapons issue either, but I now have the mind space and the energy to push further and to look for progress rather than just trying to fight fires all the time.
In 2017, you put together this, you know, this treaty, and you get a bunch of nations to rally around it. The 9 nuclear nations obviously don't. Their allies don't. And I would imagine during this time you approach these 9 nuclear nations. Were there any in those conversations that gave you the slightest inclination that they were open to the idea, or gave you a sense that, yeah, we want to move away from nuclear weapons, but ... Try and give me a sense of what those conversations entail.
I think one of the things is important to separate like the different parts of government as well. You can have a government official who sits at the State Department or equivalent in other countries saying absolutely not, never going to happen. But then you have senators and Congress people and parliamentarians who say, interesting, we're going to look at this. And yes, I'm going to work for this. And maybe I don't have a majority behind me in parliament here, but I'm going to work for this. Or you have other institutions in the country that like, oh yeah, no, actually we need to think about this. And yeah, that money could be used for other things that we see as a better priority at this point. So I do think that there's just, sometimes we look at governments and it's like we only see the leader and think that that's all there is. But there's just so many different aspects of deciding what a country does. Like it's not just one person. So I think that gives me a lot of hope. And I think that should also empower people to think about activism as, you don't just have to go to the government and get an answer and that's it, right? Like there's 100 different entry points and 100 different types of actors that somehow can shape and influence, maybe not the decision today, but the decision tomorrow and in the future. So I've had some incredible conversations with a lot of these people in different roles and on different levels and in different places in these countries, where it gives me, confidence that, also based on the past, we know that things will change eventually.
I like to try and be optimistic like that, but I see too many things that tell me no. And especially in the United States, I mean, I could see a Parkland shooting, a Sandy Hook, and all these gun tragedies, and nothing changes. Mm-hmm. Nothing gets passed legislation-wise. So it's always difficult for me. I hate to sound like the pessimist to your optimism, but I always find it so difficult to be positive that there is going to be a change, because so much, and you know this as well as anybody, so many governments around the world are reactive as opposed to proactive, especially the major, nuclear powers, the superpowers of the world. They're more reactive than they are proactive. It takes something happening for a change to take place. There always needs to be the disaster first. A 9/11 happens, then we decide we're going to make airports safer, and you got to take off your shoes and all these different things. So for me, it's hard sometimes to come around to the idea that, yeah, eventually there will be change and we'll get there.
I think you can see a lot of kind of things that have happened, right? And I think a lot of times when there's a moment that, triggers change, we like to think of it as it was the moment that triggered change, but very often there's also movements prepared for that moment, right? So they've been mobilizing and rallying for decades in advance so they can utilize these moments. And I think that that's also something really important to think about. And I was just, think about things, we write history based on individuals, but change doesn't come through an individual person. But that's how we kind of describe things like MLK and Nelson Mandela. And we kind of dismiss the organizing and the groundwork. And I read this really interesting thing that people miss about, for example, Rosa Parks, right? Like the Montgomery bus strike. And people kind of, she took this decision to sit down on the bus and that was it. I mean, she was a trained activist. She got a scholarship to go to an education that taught people different ways of disobedience. How do you protest against different things? And so like, we only see that like one action, but right, there was a whole kind of set of people that organized and organized that course and organized those scholarships and paid for those scholarships that kind of led to these movements. So I think that, sometimes in history writing, we're not very good at describing that or valuing that. But I also think that, we sometimes forget about how much we have achieved and how much we have changed. And I think about things like, for example, in the United States, gay marriage, for example, something that no presidential candidate was in favor of. Not even Obama the first time, right? Like he would not go on the record and say that he wanted that. And then people just changed, and state by state and pop culture and like, the society just kind of like tumbled. And suddenly everyone is in favor of it, and nobody will like argue that they wouldn't be in favor of it. So it's also about the kind of building the pressure points on these politicians. Politicians don't lead. I mean, they reflect society. They will say no until it's not acceptable to say no, and they will have to say yes. So I can stay positive because I can sort of see how, it's not really about convincing them. It was never about convincing the people who don't think that gay people should get married. It was about convincing all the other people that this is normal. This is the standard. This is that kind of stuff is unacceptable. And then you just kind of, overwhelm them with that and just kind of raise the expectation and raise the norm in society that this is what's the new normal. Smoking ban, for example. Even when I was a teenager, like it was normal to smoke in restaurants, and it's so unacceptable now.
Yeah.
Like imagine just sitting in a restaurant and pulling up a cigarette or
Sure.
indoors, like so weird, but we did it. And I remember how it was when the new law in Sweden came, and people were like, oh, that's going to be disastrous. People would never agree to that. People in France would never agree to that. And what do we see? Like nobody, smokes inside. So I think that the sort of shifts, and I'm not saying that it's the same kind of issues always, it's not, but I think that as a society, we also kind of underestimate the changes that have happened, and we kind of take them for granted. And we take that like, well, that was just because it was time for that, or it was because of other reason. But we kind of undervalue the fact that people were active and people made those things happen, and people took decisions and put laws and put, state by state laws and that kind of stuff to get it to happen. So I do think that change will happen on most things, and some things will for the worse, right? Like it's just that continuing as status quo, that's also a decision people make.
In the hours leading up to our conversation, I saw that the U.S. and Russia extended the nuclear arms control treaty to 2026, which is obviously some measure of good news. Do you anticipate being able to have a conversation with the new administration, and how do you go about making that happen, and how long does it take to get on their radar given all the other things they have to work with right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's been a huge amount of activity from the administration already in things like climate change, in the WHO, and we know that climate change and getting the pandemic sort of under control will be the two priorities. But I think it was a really good sign that just a week after the new administration in place, they extended this new treaty. I think that's a good sign, and I think it was good that it happened so early, so that it doesn't get put forward as the big accomplishment, right? Like week one, that's done. Now we have 4 years to do something more. Because this kind of, because I think it's also important for activists to put pressure. It's not enough just to not be Trump. Because Obama, he was great, but we got Trump after that, right? So we have to move forward, and we have to kind of push the envelope. I know several of the people who are now taking over some of these roles in the State Department, and I think that they are bringing in like a lot of Obama's old team.
Yes,
a lot of very
skillful like that?
people.
Do you like that, or would you have liked to have seen more new blood?
I think I think it's always like it's important to kind of bring in new people for kind of new perspective. I think there's an importance to bring in younger people. It's important to bring more diverse people from different backgrounds. But I think they're doing a pretty good job. And I think that there's some good people in place. But I think also there are limits to what individuals in these positions can do. And what I see, and the Biden administration is not going to support getting rid of nuclear weapons immediately the way we would like to. But I do see, of course, a lot more scope for engagement and having conversations. And our strategy is also to push the limits of what is possible, and to be sort of the advanced mission, right? Like you have to ask for a lot, and activists have to be really radical in order to move politicians. Because I think that you can see that also on things like Black Lives Matter and the climate change campaigners, the Me Too. Like, if you charge ahead with activism, right? Like the politicians have to catch up, and they have to kind of move closer. And there's sometimes a sort of strong push to tell activists or to tell sort of NGOs that don't be so radical. settle for less. You have to compromise. But I think it's not our job to compromise, right? That's the politician's job. Like they are the ones who will compromise. We will ask for all of it, and maybe we'll get half if we're lucky. So I think that's the way we want to approach this administration, that we can kind of, increase the motivation and increase the scope where we can take this kind of action and where we can push them to take further steps. And sometimes that is by complaining and saying you're not doing enough. And it's tough love. It's not to kind of like applaud and say you're doing amazing, but to say you need to do more.
That's Beatrice Finn, who I had the opportunity to speak with for about 45 minutes last night. You could see it was dark out when we did the interview here in the studio. But we're thrilled that I had the opportunity to speak with her. Again, the entire conversation, all 45 minutes, we'll do it in 2 parts. Monday on the Intersection podcast, we'll drop part 1. We'll drop part 2 of our conversation on Tuesday for those who want to listen to it. It's really a great, wide-ranging conversation with the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize winner, Beatrice Finn, of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. We got into so many other topics: North Korea, Iran, the fact that of trying to get young people involved in the movement to ban nuclear weapons was something that we talked about as well. Her visit to Nagasaki and Hiroshima, where, of course, the only nuclear bomb to ever have been dropped, the only atomic bomb to have ever been dropped was indeed dropped back in the 1940s. We'll get into all of that during my conversation with her. And again, we'll have that interview in its entirety on the Intersection podcast from Believe, BLEAV. Go and download it. Subscribe to the podcast. I appreciate it. Okay. Last thing before I leave you guys on this Thursday/Friday. We've heard the term cancel culture. We've seen its impact. The Me Too movement. People being caught on hot mics, live cameras, cell phone cameras, police brutality captured in those ways. And we've seen the results of those things. And we constantly hear this term these days of cancel culture, and it's used as a pejorative. It's used as a negative. But we have to ask ourselves the question, well, why is cancel culture big now? And the reason is simple. We always talk about surveillance. Somebody's always watching, in different societies have different levels of surveillance, right? In the United States, we always like to think, oh, we're free. We don't live in a nanny state. But the reality is the prevalence of cameras, smartphones, the ability to record anything on the fly, it's really made a nanny state out of the United States and just about anywhere else in the world where these sorts of devices exist. And that's a good thing. I know people like to think it isn't. And I know people like to think, oh, my privacy's being... Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have no reason to worry about your privacy. When you're out in public, I'm not talking about what you do behind closed doors in the privacy of your home, your dwelling. I'm talking about when you're out in public. I always say, people are always like, well, aren't you worried, about the fact that, in Singapore, there's cameras everywhere and people... I'm not doing anything wrong. Why do I worry? The only people who should worry about surveillance is people who are doing something wrong. I have always maintained this. And I think the majority of what surveillance does, I'm not saying all surveillance is great. I'm not saying it's a perfect system, because humans are running it and humans are going to make mistakes. But the vast majority of what comes from surveillance is positive. Again, United States, you take for granted, outside of 9/11, there's not been another massive terrorist attack. You know why? Surveillance. You like to rail against it, but the reality is it's what helps to keep you safe and you can put your kids to bed at night not having to worry about another massive terrorist attack because of things like surveillance. But I want to finish with a thought on something. You guys have heard about this whole Morgan Wallen thing, country music star. This video from TMZ has gotten him into a lot of hot water.
Take care of this pussy. Hey, actually, hey, y'all too? Hey, take care of this pussy ass motherfucker. Oh, fuck. Hey, Gracie, take care of this pussy ass.
Oh, yeah. That'll do it every time. Calling somebody yep. Now he's been suspended by his record label. And a lot of people are wondering, is it basically the end of his career? Now, I'm not going to be here to judge based on one comment the guy made. And it's a reprehensible comment. It's a reprehensible word. It shouldn't be used. This kid, and he's just a kid, has said and done stupid things before. Irresponsible things. And the reality is, the reason cancel culture exists now is because we have the ability to get inside the lives of public figures, politicians, entertainers, athletes, whatever it may be, because of things like that cell phone footage that somebody was taking probably from the house across the street from wherever Morgan Wallen was having this party. All in all, that is a good thing. That is a positive thing. The ability to keep people in check. If somebody knows a camera's on them, they're going to sanitize their behavior in such a way. And maybe if people sanitize their behavior enough, it will become secondhand nature. And people will say and do less stupid things. I know a lot of people like to rail against surveillance. I'm just not one of them. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments on whatever platform you're watching us on today. Again, we'll have the chat box back up for our Friday/Saturday show. I took it off today because we weren't doing the show live, so it would have just been an empty chat box. We'll do a Super Bowl preview on Friday's edition of Up Late. Buccaneers and the Chiefs. I've kind of gone back and forth. I've been vacillating all week on this. Hopefully I don't get my face eaten off by a monkey out at the zoo today. We'll have some fun video of that coming up in future episodes of Up Late. But that's going to wrap it up for us. Good show. Thank you to coordinating producer Emily, who helped us with getting Beatrice Finn on the show. And thank you to Beatrice Finn for stopping by as well. Honored to talk with the executive director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Have yourselves a great day. Stay safe. Mask up. We'll get through it. Even here in Singapore, where we don't really have any COVID, we still wear our masks. I'll talk to you all on Friday/Saturday. I'm Jason Page. Thanks for being with us. Up Late.